Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are in a much colder spell now as we do head into the first full week of May, as we are pulling in some pretty chilly air in from the northeast. Now, we aren't that far below average, about 5 or 6 degrees, so it is notable. But I think the biggest thing at the moment is the contrast to last week, where we were about 7 or 8 degrees above average, so almost a 15-degree temperature swing in many places, and it does make it feel much colder at the moment. Perhaps could even get a bit colder into Monday before those temperatures do start to recover towards next weekend. Now, I've heard some rumblings that next weekend's going to be warm once again. Now, yes, we could get back to 20 degrees or so, but we're not looking at mid-20s or upper 20s. That is out of the realm of possibility, simply because this high pressure isn't really moving. So yes, we could see more of an easterly flow, which would potentially push up something slightly milder than the northeasterly we have at the moment, but I'm not seeing any southerlies in the outlook. None of the longer range charts are showing that, and none of the ensembles are either. So anyone saying it's 25 degrees next weekend, perhaps they're looking at one model, but the majority are not showing that. So yeah, could be a bit better next weekend, but don't expect anything spectacular at this stage. The one thing, though, that is a positive and is going to remain a positive is that it is dry. Still plenty of sunshine around, just a bit more in the way of cloud. And of course, that brisker wind, which does take the edge off those temperatures, makes it feel that much colder. And of course, it's actually been really dry this spring, so there is a risk if we don't see some substantial rain in the next month or so, we could be heading into a drought. So hopefully we should start to see a bit of rain around. And there is the risk as we progress further into May, definitely an increase in precipitation from the ensembles into the longer range, potentially showing a bit more in the way of a lower pressure. So we'll check that out in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see it is mostly dry at the moment. The wind is coming in from the northeast, and that's why you can see the smattering of showers. We're seeing a little bit of convection going on over the North Sea. Nothing too crazy, but a bit of thicker cloud, which makes it quite far inland, and then a few specks of on and off rain towards those North Sea coasts. In these areas, it is feeling really chilly today. Now, recording this around the middle of the afternoon, these should be the peak temperatures, and you can see pretty much everywhere it's pretty disappointing. Mid-teens at best, 15-16 degrees, and the further eastwards and northwards you go, those temperatures dip even further. Much of East Anglia, northeast England, up towards eastern Scotland as well. Temperatures really struggling, much above 10 or 11 degrees, which is pretty poor for this time of year. 6, 7, maybe even 8 degrees below average, especially for those areas in East Anglia. We should be expecting pretty much high teens this time of year. Remember, the average July high for much of central England is about 22 or 23 degrees. So we shouldn't be there yet, but we should probably be around the high teens. Not seeing that today, mid to low teens at best. And it's probably going to continue like that over the next couple of days. Now, do just head over to NetWeather. Just want to have a look at the top temperatures today. We don't normally look at those top temperatures when it's a cold day. It's normally when it's a notably warm day we look at them. But I just wanted to compare to what we saw on Thursday, where we saw widely 27 to 29. The top temperature today, widely 14, 15 degrees. You can see a local 17 there in Exeter. Of course, that's well down to the southwest, far away from that northeasterly wind, pretty much as far away as you can get from that northeasterly. So you can see where those top temperatures are today, definitely out west. But yeah, today pretty poor. As I said, most areas are at least 10 degrees, maybe as much as 15 degrees down on what it was 48 or even 72 hours ago. Now, do head over to the latest UKV now. You can see from a precipitation perspective, it doesn't actually look too bad over the next few days. A few bits and bobs of rain and some thicker cloud through the rest of today into Monday, and maybe a bit more in the way of some heavier rain through Monday morning in the far southeast, where we could see a little bit of a streamer effect developing, but really nothing major there. Through the rest of Monday, look at that, lots of sunshine. That northeasterly starts to get a bit cut off, but we still got that cold air around, so it will still feel pretty chilly there on Monday before we start to see a recovery into Tuesday. Still bits and bobs of cloud getting dragged in off the North Sea. But for most, it's still looking pretty sunny, pretty pleasant, just a little bit chilly. And that continues for much of the week. As we get towards the latter part of the week, it could start to warm up a little bit through Thursday and Friday. You see more of a flat easterly. And if we do look at the upper air temperatures, you can see it is really chilly at the moment, around the -5 isotherm moving in for the next 24 hours. And if we do progress towards Thursday, you can see still low single digits, maybe even below freezing in a few spots, but it's coming in more from a flat easterly, which means that cold air isn't there as much, and it just simply means we should hopefully be a little bit warmer. We can see that on the max temperatures here through Sunday. You can see, look at this, max 15, 16 in the southwest, those further northwards and eastwards, 7 to maybe 12 degrees, a really poor day. And again, that wind making it feel even colder. Into Monday morning, a touch of frost in many rural areas, 4 or 5 degrees in more towns and cities, so really quite chilly evening. And you can see into Monday morning and into the afternoon, once again, temperatures still pretty poor, around the 10 to 15 degree marks. Actually pretty similar today, maybe slightly more pleasant with that northeasterly getting cut off. It does seem like the wind will be a little bit lighter tomorrow, so hopefully that's the case. But yeah, difficult to say. It will be very much down to your location and of course how much the wind does pick up. As we progress into Tuesday morning, again, more of a widespread risk of frost in many western areas towards the centre of that high. So West Midlands, Northern England, Wales, even Southwest England, much of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and much of Scotland as well. Really only apart from perhaps the far southeast and East Anglia, risk of frost. You can't believe that for the 6th of May. Pretty ridiculous. But that's what we're seeing here with the cold air still aloft and the wind starting to die down, those temperatures really falling away. Now to Tuesday afternoon, they do rise slightly higher, more around the 13 to 17 degree mark, so it's slowly nudging up. Into Wednesday, again, potentially for an isolated frost, and again, the temperatures nudge up even higher, 16 to maybe 19, and finally, for Thursday, a little bit more disappointing with a bit of thicker cloud, but still more towards those high teens. So slowly starting to improve towards next weekend, but we're not looking at 25 degrees or anything like that. Maybe 21 or 22 if the right air masses move in and we've got pretty still conditions, but I don't see anything above that. So yes, could be a bit warmer towards next weekend, average to slightly above average, but we're not looking at anything ridiculous. Just wanted to clarify that because I've seen lots of headlines. I've seen the BBC News, for example, BBC weather forecast showing potentially much warmer next weekend. I'm personally not seeing that at this stage. Could just be a couple of runs that have been showing that yesterday evening that I didn't see, but we're not seeing that in at least today's runs. Now, if you have a look at the latest GFS now, you see the northeasterly continue to push in through the next couple of days. Eventually, the high pressure topples, and that allows those temperatures to recover. But you see, in towards next weekend, it's still a bit of an easterly flow. Yes, some slightly warmer air could waft up from the south for a short time. Again, if we zoom in, have a look at those 2 meter temperatures, you can see into the afternoon, we again are looking maybe on Sunday at around 20 degrees for a top temperature, and the same can be said for Saturday, again topping out at 20 degrees. So again, I'm not seeing anything above about 20, 21, maybe 22. So yeah, not looking likely next weekend. But progressively, the high pressure does slowly allow some warmer air to waft up. Again, nothing ridiculous. But again, that northeasterly returns, that pesky northeasterly returns here into the middle of May. And you can see a bit more in the way of low pressure moving in from Eastern Europe. So that could turn it a bit colder and a little bit more unsettled. Again, it's not overwhelming, but at 384 hours, a bit of a cut-off low developing there with an easterly wind. This is the sort of pattern in mid-winter that would be exceptionally cold and exceptionally dry air mass. But you can see the air mass is much warmer here. This is the dew point, so much more moisture around. So we would expect to see some showers, and that's what you can see here. So although, yes, high pressure still at play, this east and northeasterly wind persisting, there is the risk of a bit more in the way of precipitation there progressively through May. To compare to the latest GM, again, northeasterly at the moment, eventually turning to more of an easterly in towards next weekend. And again, a slight southerly or southeasterly tilt there. So again, could be some improvements next weekend. And perhaps the GEM here showing something slightly warmer through Sunday. But again, we're probably topping out at 20 to 22 before eventually the easterly wind does re-emerge, and of course with lower pressure slightly to our south, there is the risk of showers moving up in that warmer flow. So yes, the risk of some slightly more warm and humid air pushing in here. You can see those 2 meter temperatures slowly improving, so perhaps low 20s into the following week. But look at the precipitation, there is the risk of some heavy showers and storms, especially in the south, as we have lower pressure associated with that. With that warmer air, you can see a lot more cape out to our west. That's that lower pressure system. If that did collide with that warmer air, we could be in for a bit of a thundery middle portion of May. So again, that's one to keep an eye on. And finally, if we look at the latest ECMWF, again, that northeasterly wind continuing to push in towards next weekend, perhaps a bit of an east to southeasterly tilt, but generally speaking, nothing too crazy. And then eventually the northeasterlies continue all the way here towards 360 hours with more of a direct northerly wind under lower pressure, some quite cold air mixing in there. And yeah, it doesn't look particularly pleasant at the surface. We'd be looking at maybe mid-teens still here. And if we look at the precipitation, lots more in the way of showers. So ECMWF, similar to the GFS, still keeping it reasonably dry, but perhaps a little bit more unsettled into the longer term, and still probably keeping it average, maybe even below average there progressively through May. And if you finish by looking at the ensembles, you can see over the next couple of weeks, we're generally hovering around average, well below average at the moment. We're recovering back towards average in the next 3 to 5 days. Still, though, struggling towards next weekend. Into next weekend, it still is looking all right. Upper air temperatures around average, and it's dry. But as I said, not seeing anything particularly warm. Nothing that is going to tell me low to mid-20s. I'm not seeing that at this stage. Potentially a few runs there for the following week, getting a little bit warmer. But really only a handful, and longer run holding around average, just increased precipitation there from a lot of those ensemble runs, perhaps a little bit more in the way of lower pressure. If you do have a look at the latest ECMWF ensembles, broadly very similar, slowly getting brought back towards average, but only really getting back towards average come next weekend, and then again hovering around average for the foreseeable future with an increasing amount of precipitation. Now it could just be uncertainty in the longer term, or it could be the fact that more of them are detecting more lower pressure moving in, perhaps some cut-off lows. It could be either. We'll just have to wait and see sort of the consistency of these runs. But nonetheless, very interesting seeing the progression at this stage. And I do think we'll just have to keep a very close eye on it. But for the next couple of weeks, it's looking very dry, still plenty of sunshine, just not particularly warm, still pleasant, still better than a winter day, but just not, low 20s like we'd hope with this drier sort of conditions. It's just perhaps a month too early for seeing those persistent low 20s. And of course, we are still seeing those northeasterly winds rattling in off the North Sea. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.